In 2016, a Japanese cell biologist named Yoshinori Osumi accepted the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for mapping a process so fundamental that scientists had studied it for decades without fully understanding it. His discovery: every cell in the human body carries a built-in recycling system, a mechanism where damaged proteins, malfunctioning organelles, and cellular waste get broken down and converted back into usable raw materials. He called it autophagy, from the Greek meaning self-feeding. The Nobel Committee described it as a fundamental process in cell physiology, with implications for cancer, neurodegeneration, and aging. What the Nobel announcement did not mention is that Muslims have been triggering this exact biological process on a precise schedule for 1,400 years. Autophagy sounds like technical language, but what it does is almost cinematic. Imagine your cells as a city. Factories run all day producing proteins. Some come out defective, folded wrong, damaged by oxidative stress, no longer functional. Without a cleanup system, these broken components pile up. That accumulation is now understood to be a root driver of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, type 2 diabetes, and several forms of cancer. Autophagy is the city's waste management system. Specialized structures called autophagosomes form around cellular debris, envelop it, and deliver it to lysosomes, cellular incinerators that break the material down into amino acids and lipids the cell can reuse. The body does not just survive scarcity. During scarcity, it cleans itself. The critical question for anyone interested in triggering this process is, how do you turn it on? Research from Dr. Walter Longo at the University of Southern California, Dr. Mark Mattson at the National Institute on Aging, and teams at the Salk Institute in San Diego has consistently converged on a threshold. Autophagy begins to activate meaningfully after approximately 12 to 16 hours of fasting. Before that point, insulin levels remain elevated enough to suppress autophagy. The signal only shifts when glycogen stores are depleted and insulin falls to baseline, triggering a metabolic state where the body begins breaking down its own damaged components for fuel. The timing is specific. 12 hours may begin to activate the process. 16 hours pushes it into a range where clinical effects become measurable. Now consider the structure of Islamic fasting. Sawm, the fast observed during Ramadan and on voluntary days throughout the year, runs from Fajr, the dawn prayer, to Maghrib, the sunset prayer. Depending on the time of year and latitude, this window is typically 12 to 16 hours. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave additional instruction that tightens this further. In Sahih Muslim, he is recorded as saying, "Eat the sahur, for there is blessing in it." In another narration in Sahih al-Bukhari, he said, "The difference between our fast and that of the people of the book is the eating of the pre-dawn meal." Classical scholars interpreted this as a mark of distinction in ritual practice. But the biological consequence of this instruction is precise. A Muslim who delays sahur to as close to Fajr as possible maximizes the fasting window from that final meal to iftar at sunset. In practice, this produces a fasting period of 14 to 16 hours, landing directly in the range that modern fasting science identifies as the optimal window for sustained autophagic activity. This alignment is not approximate. It is specific. Here is what most people, including many who practice Islamic fasting, have not heard. Autophagy is not only a cellular maintenance system. It is directly tied to immune function. A 2018 study published in Nature Communications by researchers at UC San Francisco demonstrated that autophagy is essential for T-cell activation. T-cells are the immune system's frontline agents, the cells responsible for identifying infected or cancerous cells and eliminating them. When autophagy is impaired, T-cell activation degrades. The immune system becomes less efficient, not in a dramatic, immediate way, but in a slow, cumulative way that leaves the body less equipped to respond to pathogens and cellular abnormalities. When autophagy is functioning optimally, T-cells activate cleanly and completely. The fast that Islam commands and the cellular process it triggers is not separate from immune health. It is a mechanism of it. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Fast and you will be healthy." This hadith, recorded by Ibn as-Sunni and Abu Naim, was understood for centuries as a piece of general wisdom, a prophet who cared for the physical well-being of his community. What immunological research now shows is that it may be a precise biological instruction that mapped onto a mechanism no one in the 7th century had the tools to measure. The regenerative dimension goes further. In 2014, Dr. Longo's team at USC published a paper in Cell Stem Cell showing that extended fasting causes a significant reduction in an enzyme called pKa, which regulates stem cell behavior. When pKa drops, the body activates stem cell-based regeneration. In the paper's own language, prolonged fasting flips a regenerative switch. The immune system begins to partially rebuild itself, replacing old or damaged cells with new ones produced from stem cell activity. Longo himself described this finding as unexpected. The assumption had been that fasting would simply stress the body into efficiency. The finding was that at the right duration, it catalyzes biological renewal at the deepest level the body possesses. 14 centuries of Islamic practice, 1 Nobel Prize, and a series of landmark journals to explain why it works. But the biology is not the final layer, because the Quran does not prescribe Sawm as a health intervention. It prescribes it as a path to something that no journal has a measurement for. And when you read that alongside the science, the implications compound in a way that changes how you understand both the command and the mechanism. Taqwa, often translated as God consciousness or piety, is the stated objective of fasting in the Quran. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may attain taqwa. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183. The command is not fast for yourselves. The command is fast for your soul. And embedded within the prescription for the soul is a mechanism that repairs the body at the cellular, immunological, and neurological levels that 7th century Arabia had no framework to conceptualize. The health benefit was never the stated reason. And yet it is there, woven into the structure, waiting 14 centuries for the tools to see it. This is the pattern. Not once, not incidentally, but consistently across Islamic practice. commands given for spiritual reasons that carry biological effects not discoverable until centuries later. The neuroscience confirms one more layer. A landmark 2019 review in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Mark Mattson at Johns Hopkins documents that fasting triggers a metabolic shift from glucose-based to ketone-based energy production. Ketones, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, are not passive fuel. They have direct signaling functions in the brain. They reduce neuroinflammation. They upregulate the expression of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports the formation of new neurons and has been linked to improved mood, cognitive clarity, and reduced anxiety. The fasting Muslim who describes Ramadan as a month of unusual mental sharpness and emotional steadiness is not reporting a placebo. That experience has a molecular basis, measured in clinical settings, and now recommended by cardiologists and neurologists as an intervention for metabolic and cognitive health across the general population. What science arrived at in 2016, Islam encoded in practice in the 7th century, not as a wellness trend, not as an optional supplement, as an obligation, one of the 5 pillars on which the entire faith rests. The structure, the timing, the specific instruction to delay sahur, the length of the fast, the consistent repetition across a lifetime of practice. All of it aligns with biological thresholds that modern science has only recently mapped. The question that biology cannot answer is how the instruction was calibrated that precisely before the mechanisms were known. That question does not have a scientific answer. It has a theological one. And perhaps that is the point, that the practice was never designed to be explained by the tools of its time, but to be understood more deeply as those tools improved. Subscribe to Faith Decoded for more insights, where ancient wisdom meets modern understanding.